It's the return of the hijabi B-girl click spit. Intergalactic words unfurled. Now we ain't no showgirls. Muslim chick with an itch to spit skits.
We met initially in school. We went to the same school. I was 2 years above Sukina. But we both joined this choir called Rhythms. It was like the only sort of black thing, you know, in our school. We went to a Roman Catholic school. And I think, yeah, we just really liked this whole idea of the choir, or Rhythms choir, where we got to sing like R&B and things that we liked. So this is how we met. However, we didn't really strike up a friendship until after that point. There's a talent show that used to happen on a yearly basis called the Young Black People's Talent Show. It used to take place in a community centre called the Malcolm X Centre. So that's where we really started our friendship, because Sukina was singing in that event and I was hosting. I was the host of the event. I also used to host on a radio station, and I was like the youngest female DJ or something like that. So I used to host on that station, on the pirate radio station in Bristol. And for one show, we had to interview, because everything in Bristol sort of like geared towards the community, or at that time, everything like the pirate radio stations, the events that were happening, it was mainly the same people involved in it. So on the station, because the talent show was coming up, there was a big boost to sort of like talk about talent show. And so I was on the radio station interviewing some of the people who were involved in the talent show. Sukina was one of the people. Back then we weren't Muslims, but Sukina was one of the people, and I think we just really realized that although we knew each other from school and we were in a choir, we didn't realize how much we had in common. So like our ideas in terms of like philosophy, in terms of like, you know, our perspective on the world and, you know, identity, many of the things that, you know, we talked about were the same. And at that point, I didn't have any friends in my circle who I could talk to about the things which I was speaking to Sukina. So I think that started the friendship. So really our friendship started with consciousness, or like content, in terms of like education, in terms of identity and music, because we met in the radio station and we would talk about the genres of music that we like. We would go out, you know, and that's how our friendship started. A few years after that, we, you know, became exposed to arts. You know, Sukina was always singing. I was always listening to hip hop and copying people's lyrics and then trying to write my own lyrics. But you know, I think a couple of years later, when we were looking for representations of ourselves and we didn't see it, we thought, let's start a group. And then we moved to London to go to university, and in London we started the group Poetic Pilgrimage.
It's the return of the hijabi B-girl click spit.
To me, hip-hop is a tool for social change and political change, because its foundation is that, you know, hip-hop began as the voice of the voiceless. It began as an outlet, as a means and a tool for people to articulate their own reality. And in them articulating their own reality, they were able to define themselves and redefine themselves through the power of the word. So hip-hop has always been that. And even though now we have different genres within hip-hop, some which is more pop-oriented, some which is more gangster or criminal-oriented, some which is conscious and peaceful and, you know what I mean, has a positive element to it, the underlying element of social change and social justice has always been there. So, you know, hip-hop is like a pen, you know, however a person decides to use it is what it will be used for. You know, you could use a pen to write something positive or something negative. But for me, I always look at the genesis of anything. How did it begin? What was its intention? What was its reason for being? You know what I mean? And so for me, hip-hop has always been that. The hip-hop that I grew up on, the hip-hop that I started listening to, the hip-hop that inspired me to become an MC was about articulating our story. You know, it was about using it as a form of justice and education, and you know what I'm saying. So people like Mos Def, Tyler Kweli, Common, you know, Slum Village, The Roots. You know what I'm saying? These are the people, Nas. These are the people that I was listening to growing up. Dead Prez, like, you know, Killer Priest. So these are the people that really defined me as an individual, you know, and I really believe that the elements of social change and social justice that these hip-hop artists were using is what made me and inspired me to become an MC.
It's the return of the hijabi beat girl click spit.
Yeah, so as Poetic Pilgrimage, we also conduct workshops. So we have like, you know, workshops that are content-based in terms of the actual information in it. Then we have creative-based workshops, but we try to be as flexible as possible. And generally when people call us in to do workshops, they have a specific thing in mind or some sort of idea of what they would like to be in the workshop or what they would like the theme of the workshop to be. And we just try to expand on that. We think it's really important to be flexible, and because, you know, our identities as women, as Black Muslim women from the Caribbean, living in London, brought up in Bristol, you know, European, all of these different things, we sit on the cross section of so many things that if we try to just do a specific workshop about this or a specific workshop about that, I think it will be really limited. But like we try to incorporate all of our identity. So, you know, things to do with like stereotyping, things to do with diversity, obviously creative writing, and, you know, all of these different things, you know, and the elements of hip hop, like, you know, something that hip hop teaches is about being true and to yourself and like, what is your reality? So we try to draw that out of people. We try to make it extremely participant led. So we are leading, I guess, or we're facilitating, and that's just it. You know, we're not trying to like, it's not a poetic pilgrimage performance. You know, we perform, we perform, you know, we do workshops, we do lectures, there's different spaces for different things, but with the workshop it is about the participant and them expanding their thoughts and expanding their creativity and practicing that, and hopefully in most of them we try to get end result. But yeah, we think it's extremely important to be flexible as well. We've worked with people as young as 6, 7, you know, and then people, you know, adults, you know, post 50, 60, you know. We worked in south side of Chicago, or should I say in Chicago, where we brought people from the north side and south side together. And if you know anything about Chicago, you know that it seems to be a city that it is just, it's made up of differences, and those differences are I don't want to say respected, because I don't think. Okay, so first of all, let me explain. When I say made up of differences, I mean made up of differences, and those differences are upheld insofar as, like, if you're from the south side, you just don't go to the north side. If you're from the north side, you just don't go to the south side. So we've done conflict resolution workshops in Chicago, in South Africa, you know, like we've basically been around the world doing things which is relevant in the particular communities where we are. So we just try to be open with that.
It's the return of the hijabi beat girl click spit.
So Muneera and I converted to Islam in 2005. We converted just before the 7/7 bombings that happened in London. So it was like about 3 weeks to the day. This is me, Sukina, talking. My initial journey into Islam began by way of the autobiography of Malcolm X. Now, as many people know, Malcolm X was an African-American leader. He was an activist. He was a spokesperson, originally for the Nation of Islam, but then he later on, you know, disconnected from the Nation of Islam and developed his own ideas and his own ideologies. But I think for me, as a young black woman growing up, especially at the time I was actually at university, I think, you know, someone like Malcolm X has always been a figurehead and a leader that I've always looked up to. So when I had the opportunity to really engage with his autobiography, I think the way in which he embraced Islam and the person that he was before he converted to Islam was very empowering for me. And there was nothing disempowering about his journey or his story. And, you know, we're both of like an Afro-diasporic narrative, you know what I'm saying? We're both of an Afro-diasporic background, in the sense that both Malcolm and myself are descendants of people that were enslaved by the Europeans in the Americas. You know, he lived a particular life that maybe was somewhat degrading to his soul, you know what I'm saying? And he made a transformation which empowered him. And I think that, you know, that I can definitely say that I identify with the strength that came from his faith, you know. And I think whenever you look at, you know, the narratives of Africans in the diaspora and Africans on the continent and how we've resisted and fought oppression, the element of faith or the element of God has never really been absent from our story. You know, you have, don't get me wrong, there have been some maybe more black socialist movements, or black, you know, communist movements, but for the most part, there's always been a strong faith element to our narrative and to our struggle. So for me, as a female deciding to embrace Islam, I don't find anything disempowering about modesty. The reason why I don't find anything disempowering about modesty is because we live in a society that thrives off of and promotes and really takes advantage of the female form, you know, and it really, you know, allows sexual exploitation to be very normal. You know, it really creates a culture where young women aspire to be almost like a sexually desired by men above intellect or intelligence or talent or anything like that. We're pushed these figures that represent a particular thing. So for me, as a woman in the West, deciding that I want to remove myself from that meat market, you know, is an empowering statement. In this time, to choose to be modest is more revolutionary than to not be. Do you understand? So it's never been a political statement for me. It's never been something that I was trying to like make a point. But when I came to Islam and I started to research and I started to kind of internally, you know, conversate with myself about my body and about femininity and about womanhood and about modesty, I trialed it actually. I was like, let me try this out. And I was aware of myself dressing, you know, short skirts and tight clothes in the summertime. And then I decided, okay, let me try out wearing, you know, more loose, more modest clothing. And I felt inside of myself completely different. I felt more dignified. I felt more graceful, you know, and that's not to say that women who don't dress in a modest way are ungraceful or are undignified. It's a choice, you know. We live in a society that gives us the option to choose how we want to present ourselves. And so for me, my decision to adopt an Islamic identity was a step of empowerment. It was a step of freedom, you know. And obviously, you know, I can't ever take away from the reality of some Muslim women in other parts of the world where, you know, modesty or the hijab or the veil or the burqa or whatever is imposed on them by way of the state, by way of their family, by way of their cultural traditions. I can't speak on behalf of them because they come from a completely different climate, you know, than I do. But I can speak on behalf of Muslim women who have chosen in this day and age to cover themselves. That is an empowering thing. So when you find the president of France turning around and saying he wants all women to be free and wear miniskirts and to let their hair run free and flow free in the air, to us, that's actually a symbol of oppression, because you're taking away my choice as a female to cover myself, you know. And I think, you know, it's really, really important that we talk about what's happening in France towards Muslim women, because we have a problem. It's a problem what we're dealing with, because we're dealing with a cultural context that's saying that you're not allowed. We're not going to give you the freedom to be who you want to be, you know, based on a very arrogant Western form of so-called female liberation policies, or, you know what I'm saying, feminism. It's very arrogant, because no one's actually asking the Muslim women themselves what they want, you know. And so I know Muslim women that would love to go ahead and get educated, or would love to have work jobs in the mainstream, but they've chosen, and they have the right to choose to wear the headscarf. And so now they're being removed and ostracized from the mainstream because of their decision to wear a headscarf. You know what I'm saying? Like that situation with the burkini and the French police putting a gun to a woman's head and forcing her to derobe on the beach. That is completely unacceptable. Do you get what I'm saying? And this is an example of the Western arrogance, and it going so far that actually you're no different than the people in places like Afghanistan and Iran that are forcing women to wear these clothes as well. Do you understand? It's an atrocity, actually, that this is happening. And it's important that feminists, stand in solidarity with these Muslim women. Don't pity us. Don't look down at us and think that like somehow we're oppressed and we're brainwashed. Like some of the most intelligent and educated and intellectual women I've ever met have been women who wear the headscarf. Do you understand? And also some of the most gentle and graceful and beautiful women as well, And so it's important when we're talking about feminism and, solidarity that we stand together. This is a form of patriarchy that's being superimposed on Muslim women. Don't, like I said, I'm going to reiterate, we don't need anyone to pity us. Do you understand? We don't need anyone to like feel sorry for us and help us suddenly become liberated. You know what I'm saying? It's not, for Muslim women, you're not going to go to hell if you don't wear a hijab. It's a choice for many people, particularly people in the West. Many people in the West, they choose to wear it. You know what I'm saying? And so, I just really want to make that clear.
It's the return of the hijabi beat girl click spit.
It's interesting because looking at this idea of a role model, I've realized that, on many occasions people ask Poetic Pilgrimage, how have we taken to being role models? And I never really get that question, or I never really understand it because I don't see myself as a role model. I know that people obviously look up to Poetic Pilgrimage in some way or gain inspiration, but I think this idea of having a role model is not something that I really adhere to. It's not something that I'm against or anything, but I'm just realizing in hindsight, looking back and analyzing my life, there have been people who I look to for inspiration in particular situations, or I listen to songs that are inspirational, or listen to parts of speeches, or see items of clothing, put together by someone, and I may say that is making a political statement or a social statement or something like this. But the whole idea of a role model, so when asking me who are my role models, this is something that I sort of struggle to answer. But I mean, obviously the first teacher is the mother. So I would look to my mother and the way that she's raised me, my mother is a minister in the church, and just looking at her and how inspirational she is to many people, in terms of conducting services, really powerful services. She's a woman dedicated to God, but at the same time, she's witty and, she's powerful, and, her and my father, they work hard to like sustain their family, and my mum's the eldest, so she like keeps really she really keeps the family together in many ways. She sacrifices, for not just her children but for her brothers and sisters. She's a giving woman. She's compassionate. She's really involved in going to prisons and doing talks and things there. She's very involved with like working with young sex workers basically, and making sure that their health needs are catered for, and that try to help them in terms of weaning off addiction and just being seen as human beings within society. Like my mum has always been involved in that, so I think she's one of the first role models. Like in terms of musically speaking, I don't know if at times, I have looked towards people like Lauryn Hill. I've looked towards like Janine. I've looked towards many different women for as means of inspiration. So, women generally inspire me. But as I said, the way how I engage with things, I don't think I necessarily engage with role models per se, because I feel like as well, everyone should have the opportunity to make mistakes, and everyone should have the opportunity to sort of change their minds. But a role model seems really fixed, Rabia Adawiya, she is in sort of Islamic mysticism. She's like a really inspirational woman who was sort of dedicated to God. But just really strong character. She was a Sufi poet, people used to come to her for prayers and such things. So there's many women who have inspired me by elements of their lives. I'm reading a book at the moment by an author called Marlon James, and even though he's a man, there's a character in his book called Lilith, and she's really inspirational to me. His book is about slavery in the Caribbean and how these characters sort of like survived that. And Lilith, just seeing her grow and just seeing how, resilient she's becoming, she's a real inspiration to me at this point. So many different people.
It's the return of the hijabi B-girl clicks.
We have been asked a question or questions around feminism and whether we see ourselves as feminists for a large part of our career. And especially in recent times, we've been asked this question quite a lot. And I guess my response to that is, again, the term feminism, I'm not sure if I 100% engage with that term, or not even so much the term. I'm not sure if I would call myself a feminist. I understand the principles of feminism and equality among sexes, but what I do think is that feminism is a construct that was created by women in regards to their particular situation. So, there was a point in history where a lot of women felt like they weren't really treated equally, and so feminism is that fight for equality. But when you look at who the fight was started by, who the fight was for, and what was the focus of the fight, I don't think it necessarily, it didn't include me. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about women of color, working class women, Muslim women. It was something that was, for a particular class, a particular race of women, and now, we can say things have changed, and we have the introduction of intersectional feminism. But even when looking at the parameters of intersectional feminism, you find identity, and it talks about race, but it rarely talks about religion. So then there will need to be something new to counteract that need to be something new to counteract that, which would be more inclusive than intersectional feminism. So then that may be intersectional and religious feminism, and then it would just continue to go on like that. And I think actually there must be a more natural way in order to try and gain equality for women and for women around the world. Also, it is something that is born in the West, something that came out as a result of the West. And I think actually when looking at cultures, there is generally some form of equilibrium. The whole idea of the need of something to counteract that is something that's really recent. You look at we was having this conversation and was speaking with Sukina, and she mentioned the fact that if you look at a lot of communities, a lot of cultures prior to colonialization, for example, there's been an interruption to something that was continuous, and that interruption, caused that disruption caused devastation to many cultures. And when you look at many cultures, when people are devastated, it is generally women and young children who are devastated the most. When you go into countries which are war-torn, you see that the people who are affected the most are generally women and generally young children. Now, if you were to go back a bit and look at, say for example, go back a bit and look at cultures without colonialization, we'll probably start to see a more natural way of living or a more natural way of life. Even in Iran, people in Iran talk about the fact that women weren't always oppressed. People talk about the fact that if you go somewhere like Sudan and you look at the population and how educated women are, and even women who have been oppressed, they haven't always been like that. So I think we need to look at it from a wholesome perspective. I think I think the idea of feminism is something that is very Western, and it has opinions. For example, me as a Muslim woman, feminism, or most feminists that I have met, when they approach me as a point of feeling sorry for me and thinking that I'm oppressed, and thinking that, like, you know, I became a Muslim because I'm a Muslim because my father is a Muslim. I've been told to wear hijab because my father wears hijab, or I'm married into Islam. I came to Islam for a husband. Now, that's supposed to be an ideology that's supposed to liberate me. But if that ideology feels sorry for me, how can it be liberating to me? So feminism, the idea of looking for equality for women, I think this is a really good thing. But I think the foundations of feminism was never about me, so I don't think it could really save me. And that's my idea of feminism. I don't object to feminists. You know, I think if we look at it and its intentions, it's good, but it just was never representative of me, and I don't think it really represents me now.
It's the return of the hijabi beat girl clicks.
Musically, I'm very old school. Like, I live and love old school reggae, conscious roots reggae, you know. So I listen to Burning Spear, Black Uhuru, obviously Bob Marley. I love Dennis Brown, Gregory Isaacs, some of the contemporary voices that are coming out of the reggae movement in Jamaica, people like Chronix, Janine, Protege, Kabaka Pyramids, really feeling them. Also on a soul level, I'm really impressed with and in love with Solange's album, A Seat at the Table. I respect it so much because I feel like she gracefully addressed and tackled our story as women of color, as women in the West, as Black women, as women with natural hair. Like, every box, like, I feel she ticked so many boxes for me. At the same time, I feel like she dealt with it so gracefully, and I felt witnessed when I listened to her music. I felt like my reality was witnessed and accepted, you know? So, listening to her, who else am I feeling right now? There's a singer called SZA that I really love. I really appreciate Willow Smith's music as well. She's young, and I like where she's headed with the music. Obviously, like the hip hop artists I mentioned before, are always on rotation. Mos Def, Talib, Common. I'm really excited about a lot of the stuff that he's coming out with. Obviously, Kendrick Lamar is a big deal to me. There's all I can think of at the moment.
It's the return of the hijabi beat girl clicks.
So Sukina and I have just come back from Belgium, where we were part of a theatre production about Malcolm X. It wasn't really a biographical story of Malcolm X. It was more looking at the things that he upheld, what he stood for. So, you know, the idea of justice, the idea of equality, the idea of peace and harmony and equity. And we were looking at these elements and looking at society today in a European context. So it was really important for the writers of the play that it wasn't just about, you know, Malcolm X, the character, his life story in civil rights America, you know. So it looks at things like racism, the rise of the far right, extremism, and radicalization, refugee crisis, and colonialization and the effects that colonialization has on communities today. So these are some of the things that the play was exploring. It was put on by the National Flemish Theatre in Brussels, and the idea is to take the show on the road. So hopefully we will be touring this next year summer. So that's a project that we're really excited about. Also, as Poetic Pilgrimage, we have had a lot of musical projects out. So we had EPs, mixtapes, collaborations with other projects or other people. But now we want to work on our album. So we're hoping that our album will be ready before mid next year. Looking forward to working with producers and various different artists. So that's something that is coming up. I graduated from my MA this year, and Sukina started her MA this year, or she's in the process of starting the MA. So the expansion of Poetic Pilgrimage, so that, you know, we've always done workshops, we've always done lecturing, and we've always written and things like this, but so that we are commentating on culture and commentating on social, what's happening socially within society, and not just a music group. You know, what we do is that we articulate our identities and our plights, and we realize that this bridges the gap between loads of people, and we would like to be able to do this not just as a music group, but you know, in other realms as well. So this is something that we're working towards. I think you'll see lots of exciting projects coming from Sukina and I, and Poetic Pilgrimage as a whole, for 2016 and 2017.
It's the return of the hijabi beat girl click spit.
I think Madame Rap is doing incredible work. I think it's really important for there to be a platform for women in hip hop, for it to also be about women who have got a message in their art as well, not just women who are, you know, falling into some of the stereotypes that we see in hip hop. It's really good to have a space that we can all come to. It's also good to have a European platform as well. I'm really in love with and impressed with and just a fan of European hip hop, full stop. So it's wonderful that this narrative is being heard. So yeah, keep up the good work.
It's the return of the hijabi beat girl click spit. Intergalactic words unfurled. Now we ain't no showgirls. Muslim chick with an itch to spit skits. Flipping the script and I'm taking my tips from sacred scripts. Make sacred trips with the rhymes I spit.